Who invented the alarm clock? And more importantly, why? The answer to the first question is stranger than most people know. The answer to the second question reveals something uncomfortable about the relationship between industrial capitalism, human biology, and the sound that ruins your morning every day. Let us start with the facts and work backward from them. The alarm clock, in its recognizable modern form, a device set by the individual to wake at a personally chosen time, was not invented until 1847. A Frenchman named Antoine Redier received the first patent for an adjustable alarm clock in that year. But by 1847, the Industrial Revolution in Britain was already producing its second generation of factory workers, and those workers needed to arrive at specific times or face fines or dismissal. The alarm clock did not create industrial timekeeping. Industrial timekeeping created the demand for the alarm clock. The story actually begins much earlier, not with commerce, but with religion. The earliest mechanical alarm mechanisms were built for monks. Monastic communities throughout medieval Europe were governed by the canonical hours, a schedule of daily prayers that required the entire community to wake at precise intervals, including during the night. The earliest mechanical clocks in Europe, appearing around the late 13th and early 14th centuries, were designed specifically to ring bells at predetermined hours to alert monks to prayer time. The word clock itself derives from the medieval Latin clocca, meaning bell. The clock was, at its origin, an alarm device built for spiritual discipline rather than industrial productivity. Before mechanical clocks existed, monastic communities used water clocks, clepsydrae, devices that measured time by the controlled flow of water from one vessel into another. Ancient water clocks capable of triggering alarms had been designed as far back as the 3rd century BCE. Ctesibius of Alexandria, a Greek inventor and engineer working in Egypt around 250 BCE, designed a water clock with a float mechanism that triggered a whistle or caused pebbles to fall onto a drum at a set hour, creating an audible alarm. His device represents one of the earliest known intentional alarm mechanisms in recorded history, designed not for factory workers or sleepy office workers, but for the measured intellectual culture of Hellenistic Alexandria. The first alarm clock in the Western historical record that was set for a specific individual rather than a community is attributed to Levi Hutchins of Concord, New Hampshire, who built a mechanical clock with an alarm mechanism in 1787. Hutchins's device had one significant limitation. It could only ring at 4 o'clock in the morning. He built it specifically because he had made a personal rule never to sleep past 4, and he wanted mechanical reinforcement. He never attempted to patent his design or commercialize it. It was a personal tool built by a craftsman for his own disciplinary purposes, and it could not be adjusted. Every morning at 4, it rang. Whether anyone wanted it to or not was beside the point. The adjustable alarm clock, one that could be set to ring at different times, arrived with Redier's 1847 French patent, and then with the growth of American mechanical manufacturing in the decades that followed. The Seth Thomas Clock Company, the New Haven Clock Company, and other American manufacturers began producing affordable wind-up alarm clocks in large quantities after the Civil War. By the 1870s and 1880s, a mechanical alarm clock was available in American hardware stores and mail-order catalogs for prices that working-class households could afford, even if it represented a genuine purchase decision rather than an impulse buy. But in Britain, during the critical early decades of industrialization, roughly 1780 through 1850, factory workers who needed to arrive at mills and mines at specific times and who could not afford or did not own mechanical clocks were served by a remarkable profession that existed nowhere else on earth: the knocker-upper. Knocker-uppers were individuals, often elderly men and women, who were paid small weekly fees by factory workers and other early risers to walk through neighborhoods before dawn and use long poles, sticks, or short-range pea shooters to tap on bedroom windows at specified hours until the occupant gave visual or verbal confirmation of being awake. Mary Smith of Braintree, Essex, was famously photographed in 1931, still working as a knocker-upper at the age of 77, using a long cane with wire ends to tap on windows. The knocker-upper profession persisted in parts of Britain and Ireland well into the 1970s. More than a century after mechanical alarm clocks had been made inexpensive and widely available. For some communities, the human alternative was simply preferred. The Westclox Big Ben alarm clock, introduced in 1909, is often identified as the product that made personal alarm clocks genuinely universal in North America. Manufactured by the Western Clock Manufacturing Company in LaSalle, Illinois, the Big Ben was robustly built, reliably accurate by the standards of its era, and priced within reach of working-class households. By the 1920s, it was one of the best-selling products in the United States. It produced a loud, metallic ringing sound that was effective at penetrating sleep at any depth, a characteristic its designers considered a feature. Millions of people woke to its sound every morning for decades. Its descendants in the alarm clock lineage include virtually every wind-up and electric alarm clock produced through the 20th century. The snooze button arrived in 1956. General Electric Telecron introduced the snooze alarm, a clock with a mechanism that silenced the alarm for precisely 9 minutes before it rang again. The interval of 9 minutes was determined partly by the limitations of the gear mechanism, which could not practically produce exactly 10 minutes, and 9 was the closest achievable interval. The snooze button was immediately popular, demonstrating that the desire to delay waking is not a modern character flaw, but a functionally universal human preference that has existed as long as the alarm has been available. Digital alarm clocks appeared in the 1970s. The first clock radios, devices that woke sleepers with music or radio programming rather than a buzzer, attempted to make the waking process less physiologically jarring, with mixed success. The alarm clock, integrated into the mobile phone, arrived with the earliest smartphones in the late 1990s and early 2000s. When Apple released the iPhone in 2007 with a fully featured digital alarm app, the standalone alarm clock began its long decline. Today, surveys consistently find that the majority of adults in developed countries wake to smartphone alarms rather than dedicated alarm clock devices. The science of what alarm clocks actually do to human biology has become significantly more sophisticated in recent decades. Sleep researchers, including Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, have documented the physiological consequences of alarm-interrupted sleep. When an alarm sounds during deep sleep or during REM sleep, the final and cognitively critical sleep stage that dominates the last portion of a night's sleep, the body responds with a cortisol spike, a rapid elevation of heart rate, and a stress response that has measurable short-term and potentially long-term health consequences if it occurs consistently day after day. Chronobiology, the scientific study of circadian rhythms, has established that human beings have genuinely different natural sleep-wake cycles determined by a combination of genetics, age, and environmental factors. A natural night owl, someone whose circadian rhythm is biologically set later than average, forced to wake at 7 in the morning by an alarm clock. K is physiologically experiencing something closer to what an early chronotype person would experience being woken at 4 or 5 in the morning. The alarm clock does not negotiate with biology. It overrides it, and it does so every day for most of the working population of the industrialized world. The alarm clock began as a bell in a monastery, became a tool of industrial labor discipline, turned into a mass-market product that defined working-class daily life, survived the transition to digital technology, and now lives in most people's pockets as an app on a glass screen. At every stage of its development, the fundamental function was the same: override the body's natural schedule to meet an externally imposed requirement. The Industrial Revolution needed workers at the mill at 6 in the morning, and it needed a mechanism to compel that compliance. The alarm clock was that mechanism. 2.5 centuries later, the machinery of industrial labor has evolved into global supply chains, distributed workforces, and digital productivity systems. But the alarm still rings. Most mornings, in most homes, someone is woken before their body is ready by a device designed to ensure they arrive somewhere on time. The alarm clock was never really about waking up. It was always about control. The only question that changed across the centuries is who exactly was doing the controlling. References A. Roger Ickherch, At Days Close, Night in Times Past. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. David Landa's Revolution in Time, Clocks and the Making of the Modern World. The economic framing of alarm clock adoption is worth examining carefully. Factory owners during the Industrial Revolution had strong financial incentives to ensure worker punctuality in a way that no previous economic system had required at scale. Agricultural labor was governed by seasons, daylight, and task completion, not by precise clock time. Artisans worked at their own pace toward their own deadlines. Factory production, organized around machinery that ran continuously and depended on multiple workers performing coordinated tasks simultaneously, required everyone to arrive at the same moment. Fines for lateness were standard. Dismissal for repeated tardiness was common. The alarm clock was not an amenity offered by industrialization. It was a compliance mechanism demanded by it. Workers purchased alarm clocks not because they wanted them, but because their employment required it. This is the economic context in which personal alarm clock ownership expanded from a novelty to a near-universal feature of working-class households across the industrialized world. Research published in the journal Current Biology in 2016 by Till Roenberg and colleagues at Ludwig Maximilian University examined sleep patterns across approximately 150,000 participants in Europe and found that social jet lag, the chronic misalignment between biological sleep timing and socially required wake time, affects the majority of the working population in industrialized societies. Social jet lag is associated with elevated rates of obesity, cardiovascular risk, depression, and reduced cognitive performance. The alarm clock is the primary mechanism through which social jet lag is imposed daily. An estimated 69% of adults in high-income countries report using an alarm clock on workdays. The majority of those individuals report